the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord. Amen. Praise Him. Mike so kindly reminded me this morning that I took the wrong Sunday off. As Trinity Sunday is not a favorite of preachers. So even at the best of times, it's hard to get excited about Trinity Sunday. Most Christian festivals honor events that are fun to describe and dramatize. The angel Gabriel's appearance to Mary, Jesus' transfiguration without the mountain, His birth and resurrection, the arrival of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost. But Trinity Sunday invites us to celebrate an ideal, a theological abstraction that's beyond our understanding. 1 in 3, 3 in 1. Needless to say, we are not living in the best of times. All over the world, catastrophic headlines darken our days. Many of us are tired, heartsick, anxious, and overwhelmed. Some of us are ill. Some of us are mourning loved ones who have died. Some of us are facing economic uncertainty or ruin. Some of us are devastated by the divisions and inequalities that infect our communities. Some of us are angry about what's happening in our national politics. Some of us are barely hanging on to belief in one God. Now the church wants us to contemplate 3. Why? If you're like me, you've been at the receiving end or the giving end of many well-meaning but inadequate attempts to explain the triune God. Oh well, the Trinity is sort of like water. Liquid, steam, and ice. 3 phases, 1 entity. The Trinity is like that. Or think of a tree. The roots, the trunk, and the branches. 3 parts, 1 tree. Or an egg. The shell, the egg white, and the yolk. Or a triangle. Or St. Patrick's shamrock. 3 petals, 1 clover. Or, courtesy of John Wesley, 3 candles in a room, 1 light by which to read. All of these analogies, beautiful that they are, fall short. And none of them address the deeper question. Why should we care? What difference does the 3 in 1 make? Fine. God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So what? Given the state our world is in right now, why should the Christian doctrine of the Trinity matter? Well, maybe for starters, we need the Trinity to teach us a lesson in humility. In this divided and polarized moment, when religion is so often used as a weapon of war, it's easy to imagine that we have a monopoly on the divine. It's easy to grow smug and complacent and to assume that our articulation of faith, our liturgy, our denomination, and our worship practices capture the best version of who God is and what God desires. One thing the Trinity does, by its very complexity, is challenge this assumption. The truth of God will always exceed us. The truth of God will always be more than our tiny, easily overwhelmed minds can bear. The truth of God will always confront, convict, and remake us, even as it soothes and affirms us. This is a good thing. It's a good and right and necessary to remember that we are created in God's image. We are not at liberty to reshape God into ours. So we begin our celebration of Trinity Sunday with a humble acknowledgement that we are out of our depth. We begin in fear and trembling, rejecting our own arrogance and recognizing that when it comes to comprehending God, we are wholly dependent on divine revelation. But then, why else does the Trinity matter? Perhaps it matters right now because what we believe about the nature of God and whose image we are created, as our reading from Genesis affirms, is a matter of life and death. How can we know who we are and what we were made for and who we should be to each other unless we know who God is? If the desire and delight of God is that we live into the fullness of the Imago Dei, then we must commit ourselves to studying and experiencing God's nature in all of its fullness and complexity. So, is there anything we can say with assurance or honor, with abandon, on this Trinity Sunday? Franciscan priest and theologian Richard Rohr argues that caring about the Trinity requires orienting ourselves in a new way. Don't start with the one and try to make it into three, he writes in his book, The Divine Dance. Start with the three and see that this is the deepest nature of the one. Start with the three and see that this is the deepest nature of the one. What might it look like to follow Rohr's advice? What will we discover about God's character, God's personality, and God's priorities if we see threeness as the ground and essence of God's being? Here are a few possibilities. We'll see that God is dynamic. If God is triune, God does not exist in monolithic stasis. Rather, God's self is fluid. God moves. Or, to use Rohr's language again, God flows and God is flowing. God dances and God is dance. Regardless of whether we'll learn to tolerate the discomfort of divine fluidity or not, we worship a God who is always on the move, always spilling over, always organic, always a surprise. His coherence doesn't require him to be rigid. Expand, not contract, God. Ken Stork writes in his poem, The Holy Trinity, God is the great iconoclast. So why does this matter for us? I think it matters because we're prone to rigidity and stasis. We don't like change. And we are often reluctant to embrace what is new, what is unfamiliar, and what is uncomfortable. But if God's nature is flow, movement, and dance, then we need to find the courage to enter into the same flow, movement, and dance. We must be willing to evolve. We'll see that God is diverse. If God exists in three persons, then each person has his or her or their own way of embodying and expressing goodness, beauty, love, and righteousness. As Rohr puts it, the Trinity affirms that there is an intrinsic plurality to goodness. Goodness isn't sameness, he writes in The Divine Dance. Goodness, to be goodness, needs contrast and tension, not perfect uniformity. If God can incarnate goodness through contrast and tension, then it's worth asking why we can't or won't. Why do we fear difference so much when difference lies at the very heart of God's nature? Given the gender divisions tearing the United States apart at this moment, I can't imagine a more relevant characteristic to ponder than God's innate diversity. As churches, communities, and countries, we will not survive unless we learn how to live gracefully and peaceably with difference. We will not heal unless we're honest about our fears, penitent about our histories, and unrelenting in our longing for God's diverse nature to be realized in its fullness among us. We'll also see that God is communal. It's one thing to say that God values community, or that God thinks community is good for us. It's altogether another to say that God is community, that God is relationship, intimacy, connection, and community. Evidence of this divine characteristic runs through all the scriptures. When God the Son is baptized, God the Spirit descends in a form of a dove, and God the Father parts the heavens to speak delight and affirmation. The Spirit of God drives the Son of God into the wilderness for a time of testing and preparation. In the Garden of Gethsemane, the Son of God cries out to God the Father for help and solace. It is God the Father who raises the crucified Son, vindicating his death through resurrection. Throughout the gospel story, the three exist interdependently, leaning to each other. If God is interactive at God's very heart, If three is the deepest nature of the one, then what are we doing when we isolate ourselves from each other? When we decide to go it alone? When we privilege independence and autonomy over companionship and mutuality? When we prioritize our individual rights over our care and concern for the most vulnerable among us? If the Trinity really is more than a bit of dusty doctrine the early church fought over, then we dare not take lightly the life-changing power of the community. God is relationship, and it is in relationship with God, ourselves, each other, and the world that we experience and embody God's nature. We'll see that God is hospitable. In the 15th century, Russian iconographer Andrei Rublev created the hospitality of Abraham, also known as the Trinity, one of the most well-known and beloved icons in Christendom. In it, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, depicted as the three angels who appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre, sit around a table, sharing food and drink. Their faces are nearly identical, but they're dressed in different colors. The Father wears gold, the Son blue, the Spirit green. The Father gazes at the Son gazes back at the Father but gestures towards the Spirit gazes at the Father but points towards the Son with one hand and opens up the circle with the other, making room for others to join the sacred meal. As a whole, the icon exudes adoration and intimacy. Clearly, the three persons around the table respect and enjoy each other. It also exudes openness. There is space at the table for the viewer of the icon, for you, for us. As if to say the point of the great three-in-one is not exclusivity. God is not a middle school clique, but rather radical hospitality. The point of the three is always to add one more, to extend the invitation, to make the holy table more expansive and more welcoming. In fact, the deeper the intimacy between the three grows, the roomier the table becomes. Likewise, the closer we draw to the adoration of the three, the wider and more hospitable our hearts must grow towards the world. And finally, we'll see that God is sacrificial love. The Trinity, at its heart, is an expression of deep, unfaltering, and life-giving love between the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. The relationship between the persons of the Godhead is not a relationship of domination, power-mongering, manipulation, or jealousy. It is a relationship of unselfish, sacrificial love. Which begs the question, if God's very being is grounded in love, and we are created in God's image, then who are we? What are we? Are we, like the triune God whose imprint we bear, creatures motivated first and foremost by love? Is love what we are known for? If not, then what are we doing with our lives? What does our piety amount to? Why should we care about the three and one? We should care because we are the children of the Trinity at a time when the world is reeling and desperate. We are the children of a mysterious, fluid, diverse, communal, hospitable, and loving God who wants to guide us into the whole truth of who God is and who we are. We should care because the mystery of the Trinity has the power to transform our hearts, leading us to coherence and dynamism, unity and diversity, hospitality and self-giving love. This week and always, may our lives reflect the transformative beauty of the triune God. A few announcements. Today is the Strawberry Festival at St. David's in Bee Blossom. Do you happen to know what time?
It is from 2 to 3 p.m. I have a little half sheet flyer if anybody wants to grab one back here.
Awesome. Caroline has a dance recital today, just a heads up. There's not a lot of space, otherwise I would have invited everybody. But hopefully next year we'll be in the big auditorium and we can invite everybody. But she has a dance recital. We are headed to the lake, Lake Cumberland, after the dance recital today for the week. So we're going to be in Kentucky, but please, my phone will be on. If you need anything, just let me know. There's a work day on the 10th.
Saturday.
Does anybody need anything? Need to know anything about that?
Well, I'm going to try, I haven't gotten it confirmed yet, but I'm going to try to get some mulch. We're not going to mulch all the beds this year, but we're going to do a new bed that's out by the fence. We're going to try to do that one. And there's a lot of weeding that needs to be done. There's poison out there if anybody needs somebody to spray. And we're going to do some cleaning inside. So I put a list on the table in the back, and those are the things that we're going to try to tackle. And I'll have donuts and coffee. And it starts at 8 o'clock. But come when you can, stay however long you can. So that'd be great. Yes.
Should we bring like our own tools?
You should, I think, because we get here and then we don't have what we need. I'm going to try to bring some cleaning rags and some detergent and stuff to work with. But yeah, that would be a good idea. And gloves for sure, because there is so much poison out there. I've had to be really careful with it because I'm very allergic to it. But there is poison out there. So, thank you.
If you ordered St. John's swag, it is in the parish hall with the name that was on the card that ordered it, as we found out, just as a heads up. Any other announcements? Okay, I feel obligated to state that I am not sick, that there is nothing wrong with my hands, that it is disgusting and I apologize for it, but it is Flex Seal. We were trying to fix a hole in our pool. And I sprayed basically my entire hand in Sarah's leg. So, I have tried as much as I can, so I apologize when you come up to communion. I can't help it. Any birthdays or anniversaries?
Birthday.
Yay, birthday. Are you going to share how old you are? Do you care to share? Fair enough. It's just, what is it? Keep them guessing. Listen, y'all, all of my things went away. Cool, we're just gonna pray. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty Father, thank you so much for the birth of Patrick. We just ask that as he continues a new year, that you guide his steps and his path. Help to continue to live into your word and spread your gospel through. In Christ's name. Through Jesus, therefore, let us continually offer to God a sacrifice of praise, the fruit of lips that openly confess his name, and do not forget to do good, to share with others, for with such sacrifices God is